It takes two to make a thing go right. It takes two to make it out of sight. Well, according to Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock. Thanks for tuning in and welcome to NPO Square, the podcast that shares the origin, mission, and journey of nonprofit organizations in New York City. Our guests discuss the humble beginnings of their organizations, the challenges and triumphs they face, and how they've managed to expand. There's also inside scoop on alternate career paths, volunteer opportunities, and inspiration on starting your own nonprofit. Let's level up together. My name is Adia Johnson. I am the host today for NPO Squared. Today we have a special guest, Nancy D. Miller, who is a representative on behalf of nonprofit organization Vision Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired, which has been running for about 95 years. You're close to the 100-year mark, 3 years away from it. So Nancy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I would like to know more about Vision. So please tell us, share its origin and the plethora of services that you offer.
Sure. Thanks so much. So Visions was created by 6 women in the early 1920s. They saw a gap in services for people who are blind and visually impaired. They were part of a women's auxiliary of a larger organization, and they decided to start their own nonprofit, their own charity, which became Visions. And the two things that they saw that really were not happening in the 1920s, number one, people who were blind did not have the supports they needed to become employed. And so the women who started the organization, in many cases, were women who had college degrees, who were running their own businesses, which was very unusual in the 1920s. But they said, if we could do it, then we certainly should give the opportunity to people who are blind to be able to run their own businesses. So they ended up being the volunteer bookkeepers. They helped blind people figure out how to do a business plan. And they had a residence for blind men who were not married, but who were working, and gave them a low-income housing where they could live while they were starting their businesses. And the other area that they saw really was not being addressed was involving the family in all of the issues that somebody who is blind or visually impaired has to confront. And so they sponsored what they called weekend retreats, where an entire family would go away for the weekend and would meet with volunteers and then later with the staff to get the skills that they needed in order to be as independent as possible, and also to get the social connections. Often, if you were blind, you were the only person in your neighborhood who was dealing with that disability. And so this way, people who were blind were able to get together and give each other hints and ideas of how they were coping, what kind of solutions they had come up with daily living skills. Now, this was before the professions in the field of blindness were created, and the university training programs to train blindness professionals didn't start till the 1960s. So the women were 40 years ahead of their time in helping people really manage to be involved, raise families, be part of the community, and get jobs and work. What was amazing about these women is, although all of the 6 women who started Visions were white, they absolutely believed in integrated services. And so everybody of every ethnic background, you were invited and welcome to be part of the program. Now, the 1920s were not known for being very open to racial integration, but the women had values that said every person has a right to access services. And if you didn't like the fact that the services were integrated, you didn't have to come to the program. And they basically said, we're setting the values. And those values have been maintained through almost 100 years now, where we focus on independent living skills, we focus on employment, We provide our services in 16 different languages. More than half of the people we serve are people of color who identify as non-white, and more than half our staff are persons of color, and about 40% of our staff speak a language in addition to English, and our board is very diverse. So we've really taken the origin of Visions and we've updated it for our DEIA efforts. But it really is true to the mission that these 6 women created back in the 1926.
That's wonderful to hear. Inclusivity is so important, and I love to see that it's represented across the spectrum. The entrepreneurship training, as far as like building a business model and helping those who are visually impaired plan and start their own businesses. So how has Visions helped those who are blind, like seek employment? What type of employment do they typically gravitate towards? And those who started businesses, what type of business have they started?
So it's a great question because early on, blind people were kind of pushed into certain professions. So you could be a piano tuner or you could be a massage therapist, but there were limits to the kinds of jobs. A lot of blind people in the 1920s would go around and sell encyclopedias or would sell brooms and mops, literally door-to-door salesmen. Well, today, blind people can do just about any job a sighted person can do. So, we certainly don't limit the types of jobs that we prepare people for. Most recently, we work with youth between the ages of 18 and 21 who have graduated from high school, but are not in college, are not in a training program, and are not working. These are the disconnected youth. And those youth come and live with us in our residential center up in Rockland County, New York. And we have graduated blind youth as HVAC technicians, teacher aides, CNAs, nurses, vet assistants. We just graduated a chef who is now going to culinary school. But she already has a certificate that she's gotten through community college. And she's amazing. At our graduation ceremony, she made dessert for 100 people. That was like her last exam. So anything you could think about, blind people are able to do. There are very, very few professions that a blind person can't do. Mm-hmm. I used to say they can't drive a car or fly a plane, but now with these self-driving cars, blind people are able to get in a car just like a sighted person. And I have heard of blind pilots. And when you think about it, pilots can't really see anything when they're flying. Everything is instrumentation. It's all using a computer to figure out where you are and what your circumstances are. Mm-hmm. So it's not surprising that a blind person can do it. We help people in entry-level jobs. We have a lot of people who work both blue collar and white collar at jobs like Amazon. And then we have people who are college professors, licensed social workers, or people who want to get retrained. They may have been doing a certain job, a truck driver or an auto mechanic when they were sighted, and they'd like to stay in the automotive field, but they can't drive a truck anymore. So we'll help them maybe get a job working in the parts department of an automobile company. Our job is to make sure that both the training a person needs and the job that they're going into is adapted for whatever their particular vision loss is. But we really rely on employers to be willing to give a blind person a chance. And one of the ways we do that, we have what we call work experience training, where somebody does a paid internship. And if the company likes them, then they'll hire them on as an employee. We had an older gentleman who wanted to do a night job. He had worked on a night job prior to being blind, and his day was already turned around. And he came to us and he said, I just need to earn minimum wage and, have some benefits. And I'd like to work at night. So we reached out to a company that does cleaning for offices. And what they needed was somebody who would fill the bags that the cleaning crew would take with them to the office. And then after they finished cleaning, they would bring the bags back and they would have to be resupplied. Well, this was a perfect job for this gentleman. And it's not a job that you would see advertised on LinkedIn or, but we found out about it because we just ask the employers. We go to different employers and say, what are jobs that you have difficulty filling? Or what are jobs where you have very high turnover? Maybe we have a blind job seeker that might be a good match.
No one does anything alone, right? We go through life and we all need support and help along the way. And to start this organization and to maintain this organization, you've had to collaborate and partner with other companies and other organizations, including the employees that you've just highlighted. So what type of other partnerships and collaborations have you had to, work with to make sure that the visually impaired are getting the support they need?
So we reach out to businesses not only to place our job seekers, but we also do disability etiquette training. So many companies are interested in being more inclusive, but they're not knowledgeable about what a blind person can do. They're a little bit fearful. They may have misconceptions or stereotypes if they've never had the experience. So we do that training for companies to just help them understand that blind people are just like everybody else. They just may do their job differently. And the goal that Visions has is to make sure that whatever devices or equipment or training a blind person needs, we would supply. Mm-hmm. And then the employer gets a fully trained employee who just has to learn the business and has to learn the job that they're offering. And we found that the way it is most successful is when our trainers are both blind and sighted. Mm-hmm. So very often we'll have a blind trainer and it's only at the end of the training that the person discloses and everybody goes, I didn't know you were blind. They have some misconception of what a blind person looks like, but 90% of the time you can't tell by just looking at the person. So it's a way of overcoming some of our biases and ideas about the capabilities of blind people. And again, we see people who are so successful in a whole variety of jobs. And the pandemic has actually helped in a way because more jobs now are remote. And that makes it easier for somebody who's blind to be able to get that job.
And you're the executive director and CEO of Visions. So how did you get into this industry? Like, what was your background and what does your work entail?
That's a great question. So I was a college student at Cornell back in 1971. And I was looking for a job that was working with older adults. I had been a guitar teacher at a children's camp during my first 2 years of college. And I decided at age 19, I hated kids. And I always had a great relationship with my grandparents. So I said, let me find a job working with older people. So back then we didn't have computers. We had a book that would list different summer jobs. And I went to the book and there was an announcement about this summer job as a counselor working with older adults and families. Now, I did not read it very carefully because when I sent for the application, I didn't realize at the time that these were people who were blind. Mm-hmm. But when I got the application back, I said, why not? Sounds interesting. So I applied and got the job. And for 11 summers, I worked at that overnight facility up in Rockland County. When I went on to get a graduate degree in social work, and I finished my graduate degree, the agency hired me full time. So during the year, I would work with older adults, helping to integrate them into older adult centers around New York City. And then in the summer, I would go back up to Rockland County and live up at the facility for almost 3 months every year. I took a short break from Visions and I worked in a nursing home. And then I worked in another blindness agency. And when the CEO position became available in 1987, the board reached out to me. And I have been the CEO now for 36 years.
Nice. Now, I spoke to someone else the other day, and they mentioned the reason people get into this field is because they just love helping. And even just from the beginning, from you saying like you worked with the kids and you didn't like them, but you were still helping, and then you gravitated towards wanting to help adults, like that's just your passion. I'm glad that you found that on really early on, and you were able to like withstand that throughout like almost 40 years. That's awesome.
It's not just about helping. I think the best charities are the ones that are really dedicated to helping people reach their full potential. You know, it's not so much about the help I give, it's the growth that each person I work with makes on their own personal journey. And it's not enough for me to work hard if there isn't an outcome for the people that I'm working with. So we really measure not the effort that we've put in, but what has that effort led to? Are more blind people working? Do they have jobs that are commensurate with their education and experience? Are more people aging in place, not having to go into an institution, not requiring home care because they're able to manage on their own? How many blind people are active in their community, volunteering? We have a very strong intergenerational program where youth and older adults mutually help each other. It has to be the impact. Right. Is what we're doing actually changing people's lives for the better?
Speaking of impact, what has been your biggest accomplishment since working at Visions?
So, I mean, there are two things that really stand out to me. We have the largest vision rehabilitation department of any of the nonprofit rehab agencies in New York State. And that means that we are able to serve a very large number of older people who've been sighted their whole lives, but have lost vision because of age-related eye disease. I mean, that's really an important service because it's very poorly funded. We get very little government money to serve the older population, and yet that's the majority of people who are blind. And I think the fact that we've been able to serve thousands of older blind people, you know, is really something that's meaningful to me, and to help them remain independent. And then the other aspect of the work that I do is really working with youth. You know, if you can work with that younger population and help them have higher expectations for themselves, gain more confidence, you know, feel that they are capable. Unfortunately, New York public schools don't necessarily do a great job of educating, especially people of color, people who come from poverty, children that have other disabilities in addition to vision loss. They often fall through the cracks and they graduate, but they're really not job ready. We work with one young man who graduated high school, but couldn't read. Now that's, to me, a tragedy. And if we can help that young man learn how to read, even at age 18 or 19, that's a huge progress for him, and it opens up opportunities. So in one 15-week session, we were able to get him to third grade reading level. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but for us, we were dealing with his dyslexia, which had never been diagnosed, and his blindness. And it required all kinds of investment of time and repetition and finding the way that would help him make sense. But he was so proud when he finished that session. And now he's at a point where he could go to a local library and get help with improving his reading. And if he could get to a sixth grade reading level, then there are a lot of jobs that would be open to him. So looking at these small steps that make a huge difference, I think that those two age groups are the ones that I think need the most attention and are the ones where, we definitely specialize. Not that we don't work with young children and babies and we work with adults, but youth bring certain challenges, especially teenagers, and older adults bring other challenges. And I think we feel really good. I know I do, and the staff does, about working from birth to death is really our goal.
So, of course, the staff was there helping that particular student. As you mentioned, they had to dedicate a lot of time and effort to help him get to the third grade reading level. How does the work culture at Visions, and how are staff and volunteers valued and appreciated there?
So we have excellent benefits. I mean, really, our health benefit broker says she's never saw any organization, business or nonprofit, that gives as much benefit coverage as we do. Staff contribute $4 a pay period toward their health, vision, and dental benefit. And that covers both the individual and their family. Mm-hmm. So, we're often paying anywhere between $12,000 and $20,000 a month for all the benefits that we provide staff, and they're contributing less than 1%. Many of the staff tell me that that's one of the things that keeps them at Visions is the benefits are so good. As the CEO, I get no different benefits than the staff do. And making that equal, the executive team doesn't get anything special. It's very much what the entry-level staff person gets is the same as what I get. And the other thing that I think people really have appreciated is we raised our minimum wage to $21 an hour. That's the living wage that the Human Services Council has recommended. And as soon as that report came out, I went to the board and we raised our minimum wage to 21. So we are, ahead of the curve. Full-time staff get 20 days vacation. They get sick time. They get personal days. And if you work part-time for at least 14 hours a week, it's prorated. So staff get great benefits. We pay for professional development, conferences, all kinds of training at our expense. And we pay for people to be certified and licensed and to go to webinars and whatever is going to help them be a better employee.
It seems like you're ahead of the curve all the time. You started this organization before it was actually a problem that everyone else noticed, and now you're doing it as well for staff and volunteers. So where do you see this organization in the next 50 years?
I think that the types of blindness that can be treated and corrected is going to change. So we may not see as many older blind persons. I think macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma will be treated better. But I think vision loss is still going to be here even 50 years from now, and I think we'll still be needed, and I suspect we'll still be here.
And how can listeners learn more about Visions, get involved, and or support?
So please go to our website, www.visionsvcb.org. That's visions with an S, V as in Victor, C as in cat, B as in boy.org. Or you can email info, I-N-F-O, at visionsvcb.org, or follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, and learn about all the different programs we have. We love volunteers, and we always appreciate donations. Our services are provided completely free of charge, no billing of insurance. So any way you can help us reach more people in need, we would love to have your support.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Great to meet you, and thank you for your questions.